Hey guys, Jim with Trevor here. So today I'm bringing you guys another deadlift tutorial video, and today we'll be talking about force loading during your deadlift. So when I talk about force loading, essentially I'm talking about the point of application for where you apply and you generate the most force in during for your deadlift to break it off the floor or to apply pressure during that slack pull. So I want to give you guys a bit of context first. So essentially, when you set up for your deadlift and you put yourself, you set up the bar over your midfoot, you've essentially you've moved your body around the barbell so that it's tracking it. So when you apply movement to the bar, it's going to track in line over the exact midpoint of your body. And so essentially, we're moving the bar from point A, from your starting position from point A to point B in one completely vertical line. And so when we move that barbell in a completely vertical line, what it means is that there's no other variables, there's no distractors, the bar doesn't shift forward, the bar doesn't shift back. We're moving the barbell in the most efficient manner possible to first of all to eliminate range of motion, to ensure that it's the most effective bar path that you move, and just to eliminate risk of injury, because when you introduce in variables of like the bar moving around out of position, then you're introducing the possibility of injury. Now, one very important factor that will affect and will play a significant role in the direction or the vertical line that the bar travels is your application of force. So the direction of force, where you apply force in to the floor. So what I mean by that is everyone knows that after you've set up for your deadlift, the first cue they use to break the bar off the floor is to leg press the leg press the floor away with your feet. So when you push off the floor and you apply pressure through your feet into the ground, that's what initiates that first movement. Now, to go more in depth into that, now what this video is about, we're going to be looking at what direction you're going to apply force in through your feet. So because your foot is a very broad, has a very broad surface area. You have the front of your foot, you have the back of your foot, your heel, you've got the midpoint of your foot. Now, if I gave you that general cue of just applying force into your foot, some people, there will be an area of confusion, or that people won't specifically think about how to apply that force. So that's something that's more in-depth that we'll be going into today. Now, the biggest thing, what I see most commonly, is that people, they apply force through their heel. There are times where I do see people, they apply pressure through their toes, but that's more of a rare instance. What I see most commonly is people, as they wedge off the floor, they apply that pressure through their heel. And the reason that they do that is because what that tells you instantly is that you've got quad weakness, or you've got a lack of quad activation. You're trying to push yourself into a more quad dominant position by further wedging yourself in. So when you apply pressure through that heel, you're further wedging yourself in, and what happens is it's essentially your body trying to compensate for that weakness. But what ends up happening is two things. The first thing that happens is you'll struggle to get a lockout. I'll demonstrate that for you here. If I was to apply pressure through my heels, you'll see that I lock out too prematurely, and it'll be a hitching of a lockout. And that's not an advantageous position, because I've moved imagine this is the barbell, this is my body. Essentially, I've moved the midpoint so that the midpoint is now behind that barbell, and for me to complete the lift, it's going to be not in a very advantageous position. Now, the second thing that happens is, so say I get into my starting position again. I've set up the bar of the midfoot. Now, the second thing that happens is you'll see that the barbell will also shift away from my center of gravity, where my midpoint is. So say if this is my starting position, and so if I perform the slack pull and the wedge, which is a more advanced movement, slack pull and then wedge, from here people, they keep wedging. They wedge too much. So essentially, we're seeing this position that I've shifted my whole body away from the bar. I've just touching on what I mentioned before. I've shifted my whole body away from the bar, and so what that does is it further emphasizes the not as efficient position that you put yourself in. So that's kind of the main thing I see with force application to the barbell. Now onto the fix. Simply, when we apply pressure through our foot, we want that pressure to go through our midfoot, the midpoint of your foot, because that's the point where we want the barbell to travel from point A to point B. Now, but how do we do that though?
the first thing that you need to do is to find your midfoot. So what's the norm for most lifters is that once they get into that bottom position, they will either tend to they will tend to place themselves too far forward or a touch back behind the bar. So what I like to tell my lifters to do is from this bottom position, shift forward or shift back. Just rock yourself around that bar until you find that pressure point where you feel most stable and you feel most force application is, which will be through that midfoot. Once you've found that point, you want to hold that position, and so now you will perform your slack pull, you perform your wedge, but the most important thing is now you want to wedge your force straight down, straight through that midfoot in a downward position. So wedging down right at that midpoint of my foot. Because now moving on to the second most common problem I see with force loading is that people, they apply force in an anterior posterior direction, and I used to do this as well. So what I mean by that is, say I've set up with the bar of a midfoot, I've come down into this bottom position. When I slack pull and when I wedge, I tend to wedge through. I tend to wedge my body in an anterior posterior direction. And so what that causes is, that will cause the bar to either shift forward. If I've set up too close, the bar will roll forward, or in the other direction. So that's a problem with loading in an anterior posterior direction. And why that happens is when people wedge through, they're trying to force their quads through more, or in the other direction, they're trying to pull the bar backwards as well to kind of compensate, and that just introduces a lot of variables that will risk throwing your movement off. Simple fix: load in a downwards direction. So after you perform that slack pull and you found that midfoot that you will be applying a force through, load straight down, because essentially this is your torso. When we get into that bottom position and you want to perform the deadlift, you want this movement to occur with your torso maintaining a flat angle. So from point A to point B, your torso is going to be flat. Your torso doesn't want to change its angle. It wants to maintain its neutrality. And so by applying force through that midfoot, and you want to apply in a completely downwards direction, essentially your arms are the lever and the back is just something that you want to keep maintained. So when you apply force, you're just moving your back up, and then your hips will come through the lockout. So just to recap what we've gone through today, it has been a bit of a complex topic. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, reach out to me directly. But essentially, when we apply force through our wedge, or when we apply force into the ground to perform the deadlift, we want to apply the force directly through our midfoot. We don't want to apply through our toes, we don't want to apply it through our heels, because that will threaten to throw off your trajectory. So you want to apply through your midfoot. And so with that, wrapping into the second point that we touched on later on, is that you don't want to load at an angle. You don't want to load coming in where you're wedging it through the midfoot, but you're wedging in at an angle through your midfoot, because even though you apply force into that midfoot, you're going to come up at an angle. So the second very important thing is make sure you load not in the anterior posterior direction, but directly downwards. So the two biggest takeaways, if you guys take away anything at all, will be: number one, apply pressure through the midfoot, and number two, apply pressure vertically into that midfoot. So that's all from me today, guys, on our force application and loading in the deadlift. I hope that was helpful for you guys, and I hope you guys really do take something out of that. So I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.